2 points. One is to say how organic architecture was in the mid-century as successful and as widespread as the international style architecture. And it was, of course, led by Frank Lloyd Wright, who was a great propagandist for the whole thing. But he had all of these different architects, some of whom had been apprentices, some of whom just really were inspired by his work, all over the country, in Texas, back east, Chicago certainly, Denver, Northern California, San Francisco, and certainly here in Los Angeles. You think about, John Lochner, for example, or A. Quincy Jones. He didn't study with Wright, but he was definitely influenced by Wright. But the thing is, we've kind of lost that chapter of modern, mid-century modern architecture. A lot after Wright died in 1959. But that's why it's so great that you're seeing this house here today. So you can see how one of his apprentices had a pretty successful career, almost entirely here in Claremont, and is completely unknown outside of Claremont, which is why it's so great that you're here today. Modernism is not just the international style, it is this organic architecture rooted in the earth. And this is a magnificent, obviously very large house. The second point about Foster Rhodes Jackson himself, he studied, he was an apprentice with Wright around 1950. He had been in the Second World War after that, wanted to become an architect, went to Taliesin and worked with him for several years, and then came to Claremont and had his career here. And while it's obviously that he was a Wright student, for example, this desert stone, which you see throughout the house, Wright used that when he moved, after he moved to Arizona in the 1930s. And it incorporates both concrete, which is sitting heavily on the ground, it's growing up out of the ground, and of course it has the stone. But then it's not just an imitation of Wright. Foster Rhodes Jackson really made this design, this architecture, his own. The stones here are from the local area, have a very different color and tone than the desert stone that Wright used out in Arizona. But even then, there are so many inventions. This kind of accordion wall he used in a lot of his houses, and I don't know anything else like it. The boards support each other, so you don't need any studs behind that wall. It supports itself. So that's an invention that he came up with, and this is the sort of thing that Wright did encourage. This looking out towards this little balcony out here, also an element that Wright used in many of his houses, but Jackson interpreted it in his own way as well. The way he spreads out into the landscape, I was just looking out in back here as well, out into terraces, the different levels of the ground, all of that is very distinctive to Foster Rhodes Jackson. You would not mistake any of his houses for John Lochner's houses or Lloyd Wright's houses, for example. And so that just shows you the spectrum of ideas that these architects associated with Frank Lloyd Wright were able to use and develop on their own. So I really hope that Foster Rhodes Jackson will become better known. Certainly here in Claremont, thanks to Claremont Heritage, he is much better recognized here for his buildings, but there's more organic architecture everywhere. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.